You recording? Yeah. Oh, cool. All right. Hi, I'm Matt Pye. I'm a lecturer in the School of Environmental Sciences at the University of Sydney, and today we're going to talk to you about moving pracs online and whether that is possible or whether that's practically impossible. First of all, though, I'd like to make an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. They're the lands that we're meeting on today to record this video, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Now, the course that I'm talking about today is Life and Evolution. It's a first year course at Sydney University, first semester, and we look at the evolution of life and the Earth's diversity as a whole. There are about 700 to 1,000 students in it and come from a really diverse range of backgrounds. And today I'll be presenting this with my Deputy Unit Coordinator, Fran and Supervisor in the labs, Cameron Negus, who is also responsible for designing some of those labs. Now, over the years, we've selected a really good group of casual teaching staff, an excellent group of casual teaching staff, who've been hand-selected based on their teaching philosophies. And those philosophies are about having an outward-facing, empathetic, student-centred and fun vibe. And our student unit study survey results have frequently mentioned this in the feedback, that the demonstrators and the labs that they create are the best experiences in the whole course. So we have them to thank for the success of this course over the years. In 2020, Life and Evolution started a little bit differently. Within the diverse cohort of students that we have in Life and Evolution, a number of these students were affected by the travel ban in China. So they weren't going to be able to come to the University of Sydney. And so we're having to deal with plan B for how we're going to run the pracs. But we were never going to get rid of those pracs. Over the weekend between week 4 and 5, we're informed that on the Monday there would be a decision about face-to-face teaching at university. On Monday, we were given that notice and we had less than 1 week to move all of our biology practical content online. We thought immediately that would be impossible, but soon discovered that it was only practically impossible, that it would be possible to move these pracs online if we thought a little bit differently about the delivery and about some of our core learning outcomes.
Hi, I'm Fran Berg. So our practicals have a really hands-on component to them. So we do things like dissections, plant sectioning. We have 2 to 3 pracs where students go into the field to do their prac work. So we really struggled in the beginning with how would we put these really hands-on intensive pracs online. And because it was so rushed to get them online, what we actually found was that we just had to go with our gut feeling of what we thought might work. However, we actually found that initially that may not have met all the learning outcomes that we were actually trying to achieve quite as well as we thought we would. So for example, at Sydney Park, which was it's our flagship practical for our advanced students. So there's about 60 students, they go out to an urban park like this, and in partnership with the City of Sydney Council, they come up with their own experimental design about urban ecology, design it, implement it, and then analyse their results, and they really have a sense of ownership over their project. So it's a fantastic experiment, and they learn through experience. So halfway through this project, which happens over multiple weeks, that's when we got the information that we weren't allowed to do face-to-face teaching anymore. So our gut reaction was to try and get it as close to what it would have been for the students as we could. So what do? We sent the demos out to collect the data for a subset of these projects, and then gave the students the data to analyse. And we thought that it was all going really well. They really loved it. They thought they still had ownership over the project. Everything was going great. But it wasn't until we were doing these one-on-one interviews before they had to hand in their reports that we actually realised they were very confused by the experimental design and also the way that the data was presented. And what we realised here was that because they missed out on that troubleshooting element that comes with actually doing the hands-on component of the prac, they didn't really get the same learning experience that they would have had they been in the field. Secondly, what we also found is that because students weren't meeting face-to-face in the prac, they didn't have those incidental, informal chats that they would have had, and so they couldn't actually clarify with their peers. They didn't have that peer-to-peer learning that would have helped them understand the topic better. So based on that experience, for the last part of our semester, we came up with 3 key principles that we were going to embed into all of our transitioned online practicals. And so those 3 principles were to really to value add to the traditional learning outcome. So not necessarily to make the prac as exact as it was in the actual face-to-face experience, really say, okay, what could we value add to the online experience? The second thing is that we wanted to give each of the students a substantial task to do in these online practicals, so that they were still actually doing something, not just looking at data that we presented to them. And finally, the third principle that we wanted to do was to really maximise the amount of time that students were spending in breakout rooms, in peer groups, so that they could have those incidental chats without demos and staff being around.
Hi, my name's Cameron. I'm one of the head supervisors of the practicals for this unit, as well as part of the development team of changing these practicals to online teaching. I'll run through a couple of example case studies of the practicals and how we adapted it to online teaching. Overall, these practicals were developed to maintain a strong social aspect. So when in the Zoom sessions, we mainly developed the timing around students being in breakout rooms. And also we could simulate the real lab situation where demonstrations would pop in to check how the students are going. So one of the example practicals was the comparative anatomy. In this one, what the usual plan would be in the lab, would students in groups be dissecting invertebrates, vertebrates from both aquatic and terrestrial environments. And the main learning outcome was to understand that comparative anatomy between the species. This was particularly challenging adapting online because the students obviously couldn't do any dissections. So we couldn't think of any other way besides going with the video presentation for the students to watch in groups, but we did want to keep this practical as interactive as possible. So what we did integrate, or what we introduced to this practical online, was group presentations. So what the students would do in groups is develop a PowerPoint presentation and present that to the rest of the class. And they were meeting other learning outcomes with this task. So developing really crucial communication skills, which would be helpful for anyone continuing in any type of research capacity. Another example of adapting a practical to online teaching was the transpiration prac. In this practical, students in the lab would be given a set amount of pea plants, and they were given freedom to come up with their own experimental design. So they would consider things like developing hypothesis, considering replicate size, integrating a procedural control, and we'll let the students make mistakes and they can learn from this. So adapting this online, again, we wanted to keep it as interactive as possible. So even though we used a few videos to show what we did for them, we gave the students still creative freedom on their own experiment design. We would then give the students a data set that would correlate with the experiment they designed, and they would actually present this in the form of a poster. So it was something that we never imagined integrating to online teaching, but it's a really useful skill for students to be introduced to, actually. So we presented the posters in the form of a poster session where students would showcase their poster to the rest of the class, and it's a very useful skill for students who want to continue doing research throughout their study or after they learn or know how to present a poster. So the last example was actually one of the field trip practicals where students would go and visit the botanical gardens, and they would almost go around as a tour group, learning about the evolutionary process of plants and also learning about the alternation of generations. So we couldn't do this, we couldn't get a big group of students out into the field, even though it was away from the lab. So again, we had to think of a way of developing this, keeping it as interactive as possible. Again, we went with the video approach. We had demonstrators go out into the field, record videos in front of these plants in the botanical garden, and we would present the videos to the students in the practical online. The way we made it as interactive as possible was introducing a self-guided virtual tour. So we did this using Google Earth, where we could put the students in front of a massive conifer while the students are actually behind the screen of their computer. Another element we introduced in this practical was a bit of a fun game show quiz, which we did in terms of revision for the practical. And the students showed really great feedback for this practical too. It was fun, it was relaxing. We had game show, scorekeeper, and a judge roles held by the demos, and the students really loved it. So we actually used that technique to also create a revision session for the overall unit a bit later on.
The lessons that we learned, that we went through in first semester, we've passed on to second semester. So they can already start in a better place, having had all this student feedback, positive, really positive student feedback on their experiences. And we hope that we can pass on some of this information to you too. So what did we learn this year? First of all, we learned that to move these biology practicals completely as they were online was not going to be possible. But what was possible was reinventing them, reimagining our learning outcomes and reapplying it in a completely new format. A new format that lends itself to some new innovations. There are definitely elements from these experiences that we will be keeping in labs moving forward and that have enriched the student experience. The students overall commented positively on their experiences, saying that the biology labs were, in one case, their best part of their week. Our USS scores, the Unit of Study scores, rose again this year, and we're at an all-time high for this course. So students really resonated with some of the ways that we were tackling these problems. Of course, to implement these changes, the reimagined learning outcomes is a hell of a lot of work. We won't pretend that it isn't. But our amazing casual teaching staff really carried the show. They were responsible for redesigning a lot of the video content, a lot of the actual content of these pracs, and we couldn't have done any of this without them. So specifically, the framework that we would like to pass on based on our experience with our students are to value add to the traditional learning outcomes, rethink them, reimagine them, add in a substantial task that the students can work on together so that they get a feeling of that teamwork and some form of social experience, and finally to maximise that time in the breakout rooms. It's the only experience that even resembles their experiences in a lab in terms of the interactions that they have with the students and forming those social bonds that are so important for university life.